cause. How did he do? Take a look. How did he do? In 2012, 2 days after graduating high school, and with just $1,800 in his pocket, the young man from Illinois, who no one had ever heard of, started an organization whose grand ambitions were captured in its name, Turning Point USA. Great name. And I have a feeling it's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Does that make sense? It's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Look at what's happening. 12 years ago, Charlie walked onto his first college campus, the very liberal University of Wisconsin at Madison. He set up a card table and put up a sign with 3 words: "Big government sucks." Could you believe that? That's Charlie. That day, Charlie talked to every student who approached him, most of whom were probably quite a bit older than he was. Finally, after many hours, he found the first ever Turning Point chapter leader. His first year out of high school, Charlie traveled 300 days raising money and taking his message to campuses all over the country. He lived out of his parents' basement, and they actually loved having him there. They loved Charlie. Everybody loved Charlie. And on the couches of friends and supporters, he lived off couches for 2 years, 3 years. Then life started getting a little bit different, but he was always the same. For 5 years, he refused to take a paycheck, but day after day, he worked from 5 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. in the evening, always. His staff remembers that he wore Walmart jeans and T-shirts from the Goodwill store. Remember the Goodwill store? It wasn't easy, but Charlie wasn't in it for money at all, never has been. Money was never his thing. He was always in it for the mission. As he liked to say even back then, we have a country to save. Just what he did. He'd call me all the time, "Sir, we have a country to save." I said, "Charlie, thanks very much for telling me that. I appreciate it." Charlie volunteered for my 2016 campaign and traveled the nation with my son, Don, and Eric. I got to know him very well and saw immediately that Charlie was actually a master builder of people. It was Charlie who first started organizing young black conservatives hungry for support and leadership. It was Charlie who stood up for persecuted Christians and Jews on college campuses. It was Charlie who helped bring online censorship, free speech, and cancel culture to the fore of our political debate. He was right up there with me. It was Charlie who helped unite MAGA, and you know what MAHA is? That's right, Make America Healthy Again. And tomorrow we're going to have one of the biggest announcements, really medically, I think, in the history of our country. We're going to be doing it with Bobby and Oz and all of the professionals. I think you're going to find it to be amazing. I think we found an answer to autism. How about that? Autism. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking in the Oval Office in the White House about autism, how it happens, so we won't let it happen anymore, and how to get at least somewhat better when you have it, so that parents can help their child, their beautiful child. That's a big one. I've been bugging everybody over there, get the answer to that. You know, 20 years ago, 1 in 10,000 were born with autism. 20 years ago. The most recent survey says 1 in 12. How bad is that? That's for young boys, baby boys, but also girls a little bit better. It's about 1 in 20, but we can't, because obviously there was something really wrong, and we think we know what that is. It's going to be, I think it's going to be one of the most important news conferences I'll ever have, and I look so forward to it. And you know who else looked forward to it? Because he knew. I tell him a little bit about what was going on. Was Charlie. He would have been front row center, believe me. We'll be missing him tomorrow. It was such a big deal for him, too. He brought together Donald Trump, Bobby Kennedy, right here in the great state of Arizona 1 year ago. Remember that? What a night, what a day that was. And it was Charlie who was among the first to speak to me about a man from Ohio by the name of J.D. Vance. Have you ever heard of him? He's doing a good job. But Charlie would often call me, sometimes the night before a big event, the other side of the country. And he'd ask me, he'd say, do you think you could come and speak at the event? The following day, right? I'd say, Charlie, I'm the president of the United States. You want me to travel 4 hours by plane? And you know, sometimes I did it. He was a very good guy. He was a very convincing guy. He didn't stop, but he would ask for things like that. Sir, could you be tomorrow in California? I said, Charlie, give me a break, please. He just wouldn't stop. And he succeeded. But I almost always went because you never wanted to let Charlie down. He worked so hard. You just didn't want to let him down. I felt guilty. It made me feel very guilty. As president, many people asked me for things, but Charlie was one of the few who always gave more than he took. He was a giver, much more than a taker. And no matter how big Charlie became, no one was too small for him to notice. He was good to everybody. Didn't matter. Several years ago, a fourth grader asked Charlie to appear on his podcast, which was probably only watched by the parents of that fourth grader. And Charlie, who was actually pretty hot at the time, to be honest, he agreed, and the boy asked for advice. Charlie replied, the left, I call it the radical left. I call it sometimes the radical left lunatics. But Charlie didn't say that. He called it the left. He was probably right, but I can't help it. I can't help it. So he said the left, radical left lunatics, may have all the money in the world, but they can never outwork me. I will wake up as early as I need to, about himself. I will stay up as late as I need to, and I will never stop fighting for our country. And he did this until his dying breath. That's what he was doing. That's what he was doing. Think of it. Wow. What a horrible moment. I was in the Oval Office when I heard they came in, and it was like a surreal experience, a terrible, terrible. I had some very big people in the Oval Office, and I was in the midst of a very important conversation for our country, big people, the biggest. And I said, you have to leave now. When they told me that, they told me in front of a group of very powerful people, I said, you have to leave now, right now, please. Right now. You have to leave, go. By his own determination and skill, Charlie Kirk built Turning Point from his humble beginnings, the beginnings that nobody believed could ever end up something like this, into a great movement and a juggernaut of American politics. And, you know, we have a massive stadium loaded up with people, but he got tremendous crowds before he had this kind of horrible news and before we had to hear what happened so terribly. He delivered more than 250 speeches a year at over 200 colleges and universities, and that was at a time when it was not really vogue to go to colleges and universities if you were a conservative. It really took great courage. And we used to talk, and I said, you know, I think they're much more conservative than we know. And he agreed, but it just wasn't something that was happening because the radical left would do very bad things, very dangerous things. But Charlie set up chapters on 2,200 campuses and spoke at more than 1,000 churches. He launched a podcast and radio show that grew to an audience of 1 million Americans a day, one of the bigger shows on radio. And Charlie didn't just bring young